Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, happy new moon, happy Uposatha, everybody. We're continuing on with our look at the Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness, of which there are four. And we covered the fourth one, that is mindfulness of Dhammas, or Dhamma structures, or structures of reference, which is a way of looking at our thoughts and the content of our thoughts. That's a very subtle thing to do, to actually pay attention to our thoughts and at the same time slot them into these little Dhamma categories that we've been given. Less subtle than that, arguably more important because of that, is Chittanupassi, mindfulness of the mind. And we talked on that the last time. And sort of gave a broad overview. The Buddha gives, 6, 8, 9 different things that you can look for. And this includes greed, hatred, and delusion, but also torpor, restlessness, or states of concentration, uplifted mind, liberated mind, things that we can look for. And one of the caveats is you're not looking at anything in particular, right? Because you can't. The thing about the chitta, the thing about the mind, is it is invisible to us. It's like our own eyeballs. We cannot see them, right? Our mind is what perceives things. Our mind is what understands things. Our mind is the thing having ideas. So while we can be cognizant, I am conscious of this thing or that thing, the consciousness itself is invisible to us, right? So when we are being mindful of the mind, we are looking for these sort of themes that persist through the mind for a length of time. Yeah? And because our mind tends to get in on these themes or move on these tracks for a length of time and elaborate on them, develop them, to think along those lines for a period of time, we can wake up to it, we can make note of it, and we can see how these thoughts and the ones that come slightly after and the ones that come slightly after are related. They might be about different subjects, but look, the theme has continued. And what is that theme? Well, maybe it's greed, maybe it's hatred, maybe it's non-greed, maybe it's non-hatred. Maybe the mind is very open, and so we are having all these kind of open-minded thoughts and noticing things that we didn't notice before. Or maybe the mind is very contracted, and we just keep zoning out and wondering why we're missing things. Yeah, and we can wake up to this and we can be mindful of this. And it becomes very powerful because unlike the fourth Satipatthana, which is these structures that we've been told to look for and to decide beforehand, okay, I'm going to look for the 5 hindrances as they arise. We're looking at the mind more just how it is and seeing what does our mind do. How does our mind move and change and evolve and react to things? Yeah? And so, whereas the Dhammas are kind of given to us, this mindfulness of the mind is going to be very personal. The different mind states that we experience through the day are going to be based on our experience through the day, which we are the only person having that experience as the day goes on. And they're also built up of our previous experiences, which, again, we are the only ones who have had those previous experiences. So the categories are kind of general. Yeah, look for greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. But because we use that as a jumping off point to look at our own mind and see what that looks like in our own mind. Now I felt that in the previous talk, I was like, yeah, I mentioned greed, hatred, and delusion, but didn't really get time to elaborate on them. And it felt to me that it's kind of too simple to just say, oh, and then there's greed and look for greed. Because I've seen this in myself, and I think that I'm probably not projecting here when I say when we hear the word greed, we probably think of some evil tyrant king with a table full of stacks of gold coins levying another tax on the peasants, yeah, and going, and we think that's greed. And so when we're told to look for greed in our mind, we're looking for that. We're looking for that money grubbing Scrooge corporate CEO, backstabbing lawyer type chasing an ambulance kind of mentality. And if we don't see it, we're like, okay, I guess I don't have greed, which is highly unlikely. If we understand what that means, then we're pretty close to enlightenment, right? It was like, well, I'm not seeing an evil tyrant in here, so I must not have any greed. But this category is actually talking about a lot of different mind states. And what the Buddha gives us in the structure of Chittanupassi, or mindfulness of the mind, is just the general categories. He can't give us so many specifics because our own personal experience is going to be so different from the person next to us, or the person down the street, or the person on the other side of the world. And the Buddha is giving what is universal. What is universal is there will be mind states or themes or moods of greed, hatred, and delusion, and non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion, that the mind moves through. But what that means, we have to investigate. And we have to start making associations. Yeah, we have to figure this out for ourselves. It's not just the tyrant. It's not just the lawyer. It's not just, the obsessed fan. It's like there are so many different possibilities. Yeah. So I thought I would go over that. And part of that is because I think we should cover mindfulness of the mind a bit more. And so I went to, this became quite popular a ways back. This is Bhikkhu Analayo's book, Satipatthana, The Direct Path to Realization. And so this is 277 pages on Satipatthana. Yeah. And I opened it up, and sure enough, I had already guessed, but sure enough, 9 of those pages are devoted to mindfulness of the mind. To be generous, 5%. 5% of the book talks about your mind, the thing in which everything happens. Yeah. But that's not even the whole story. If you were to look for some primers of how to understand greed, hatred, and delusion, only a third of 1 page of that 277 pages is devoted to greed, hatred, and delusion, only to the extent to say it is possible you could have mind states of greed, hatred, and delusion. They would feel like a net, a dart, a fire burning within you. He quotes the Dhammapada, and that's it. And he moves on. He moves on to the interesting stuff, the stuff about concentration and uplifted mind states and stuff like that. And this is not weird. It's very normal because these categories are so general. It's kind of assumed. We say greed and you know what greed is. But I'd say this warrants a closer look. Yeah. Now, one of the things that might help elaborate this is first thinking of the paccaya. And this is something that the last time I was invited to talk on paccaya, or conditions, I looked at the Abhidhamma where this shows up, the list of 24 conditions. And my eyes glossed over and I said, look, I don't even want to talk about this. Yeah, this bores and annoys me to no end just looking at this list. I have nothing to say about this. This is Abhidhamma. But this is actually where it's very useful. to understand mindfulness of the mind. So what are the 24 paccaya? Actually, maybe I can just share that briefly here. So we've got this list, right? And this is the 24 conditions or paccaya that shows up in the Abhidhamma, and they are root condition, object condition, predominance condition, proximity condition, continuity condition, co-nascence condition. These are conditions, yeah? And what is this talking about? Well, this is talking about the mind is not just one thing. It's not just this orb in space that is a different color or flavor based on what it's feeling. The mind is this vast network of invisible connected conditions that play off of each other. So we have these different thoughts that are going on, and what we can't see is that what thoughts we have at what time affects all of the other thoughts that are to come. Yeah? And it's the same with our mood. Yeah, there is the basic condition of the root of the mind, and this is the unwholesome or wholesome root. Greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. And that is one of the primary conditions for what kinds of mental activities we're going to have. But there's also the object, like what object are we paying attention to? There's going to be predominance, like certain conditions when they are present, they are going to greatly affect things. There's going to be proximity. Are we close to the object, or are we close to a feeling or an idea that's come up recently? And proximity might make that stronger. I've talked about grief, right? So when you experience the loss of something that was dear to you, you feel grief. Proximity condition is very important when we talk about grief, because grief, you can't talk yourself out of grief. You can tamp it down, you can suppress it, but you can't make it play out quicker. The main thing that causes grief to hurt less is just the proximity. The longer you are in that state of loss, the more calm you can be around it. Yeah. There are conditions that insist on that we have a continuity of mind states, yeah? And this is why we can have a certain mood last for a certain amount of time, because certain conditions are saying, no, stay on the theme, yeah? We've been obsessing about this one thing. Keep obsessing, yeah? The mind makes more sense when we're consistent, yeah? And so you have all of these different conditions, and this is, they're invisible, but when we have one thought, it will affect the thoughts that come after, yeah? And the thoughts that we're having now have been affected by the ones that came before. And so learning about, specifically I'd like to talk about greed and hatred, because this weekend on Sunday we're going to talk about delusion. But just learning to understand greed and hatred as these possibilities of moods of the mind also involves considering these conditions, yeah? So it's not just one kind of thought or one kind of feeling that we might have, but it's also the way that certain ideas condition others, yeah? And we can wake up to that. We can see how, whenever I start having this kind of thought, I'm more prone to start fantasizing or daydreaming or wishing I was somewhere else. And then it starts to click on us that this seemingly neutral line of thought actually conditions greed, yeah, this sort of fantasizing. And once we realize that, we know that fantasizing is like, yeah, that sounds kind of slightly greedy, not super haha greedy, but kind of greedy. I guess that's in that category. But then we look and we see all of these other things are strengthening it, making it last longer, making it come up more often, yeah? And that's how we know that even though they're seemingly neutral, they are still part of this framework. They are arising in a greedy mind state. Yeah, even though they're seemingly neutral, the fact that they condition and strengthen the greedy states means that they are arising based on that root. Yeah, and the same with hatred. Yeah, we might think that like to get up in the morning and to be kind of groggy and grumpy and to kind of stumble downstairs and accidentally trip on the cat and grumble that the timer we set for the coffee maker didn't work and all of these things. We might think it's a victimless crime, right? It doesn't hurt anybody. It's not hatred. It's just me waking up. But if we look at that and we see that what happens when we entertain that and we dwell in that for a little while, and then we have our first interaction with a living being, what is that interaction going to be like? Is it going to be, oh, hi, you little cat? Oh, it's so good to see you. Or it's going to be, okay, stop meowing. I'll get to you in a minute. Let me start the coffee. Yeah. Well, I mean, that obviously is probably in the root of hatred. That wasn't a friendly response. But the other ones that came before were also in that. Yeah, we may have woken up in that particular mind state because when we wake up, we probably don't feel great. We've been horizontal for hours. Yeah, it takes a while to get the machinery going. And if our mind takes that in, it takes in, oh, the state of the body is not great. Energy is low, circulation is low, hungry, need coffee. It takes in that data and it decides, this is not good. I don't like this. And so we're primed for hatred. We're primed for aversion, right? It doesn't guarantee aversion, and it could be quite a weak state of aversion, but we're primed for it. Yeah, the root is getting ready, and if it hasn't taken hold of the mind, it's moving in that direction. But now we could wake up and say, oh, okay, I had a really weird dream, and we start to play it out in our mind, and we're like sorting things out, and like, oh, okay, that led to that, led to that. We wake up with a bit of mindfulness, and we get up and we're like, oh, okay, I'm ready for the day. I can't wait. I'll get some coffee, I'll go feed the cat, and then I'll go meditate. And suddenly we start to check in on things, and we're like, okay, I had a thought, it ended. I had a thought, it ended. I had a thought, it ended. It looks like I'm in a mind state that's not very attached, not very greedy or resentful, actually kind of neutral. Right? And we could be like, okay, so that's non-hatred. That's non-greed. Because it was simple and straightforward. And if we started out that way, it was because we made a conscious choice. We leaned towards mindfulness. That conditioned us to go downstairs, and we kept processing things and being mindful of things and trying to get some sense of things, yeah? And stronger mindfulness can develop as a result. And with more mindfulness, we're less likely to fall into the habitual patterns. So that's probably, I was thinking of like one of the most, I was trying to think of defining characteristics that you could say of greed and hatred. And it's hard, right? Because you can't authoritatively say much of anything. There's only one thing I could come up with that's really definite, and that's what I just alluded to. And with states of greed, hatred, and delusion, what you can know about these is they are finite. They are limited. Because they deal with an object, and that object might be yourself, or it might be another, or it might be just some external object. They are limited. There is a finite number of states of greed that you can have. And it might not seem that way. It might seem like your mind is capable of endlessly proliferating on things to be interested and obsessed and attached to and all of these things. But the reality is, because greed is a thing, it is a particular habitual response, it has to be finite. It has to be limited. It is a defined way of relating to things. And so if you were to sort of map what these are in relation to, so say you have a circle, and in that you put greed. So all of the states that we're going to talk about that are based on the root of greed would be within the circle. all of the states which are based on non-greed would be everything else. Everything outside of the circle would be non-greed, because those are not defined. Those are not scripted. Those are not about habit. Those are not dependent on their object. Yeah. So when we look at greed, hatred, and delusion, we can look for this marker of our mind being focused, being specific, being finite. You know, often when we're angry, it seems like there's a very limited number of responses we can have to the situation, right? Like, I have to respond to this. I have to say something. But what can I say? And we find the mind suddenly, when we're in an argument, like playing chess. I'll say this and they'll say that, and then I'll respond with this and I'll do this. And we keep doing it, right? We play it out, the argument in our mind, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. We find that the mind is contracted. It's in a pattern. Yeah. And so it seems like the choices are limited, right? Whereas when we're feeling friendly, we're taking things in. We're observing and we're relating to things, and we're capable of empathy, right? So we're more interested in what's going on around us than what we expect to have happen or what we're trying to resist. Yeah, we're tolerant, we're aware, and we're empathic. And that's non-hatred. Yeah, so that's the one defining characteristic I could find. Now, talking about greed, for instance, this is where I decided, okay, if I'm really going to open this up, I'm really going to add in a whole new chapter in Benalio's book, the one that was accidentally left out on greed and hatred, because those are minor things. Yeah, I'm sure they'll figure it out. I had to go to like the dictionary or the thesaurus, right? And just start looking up words, right? Because greed talks about 1/3 of all of the possible mind states that you can have, right? Is that are finite and limited and directed and habitual, that are rooted in the delusion, the ignorance of an existing being. So that's a lot of possible different mind states. Yeah, but I did start to spitball a kind of list. Yeah. And one thing you can see about one of the conditions that nurtures greed is the sign of the beautiful, right? You probably get this. Yeah, the Buddha says this in a lot of different suttas. You know, what is it that conditions sense desire? It is improper attention on the sign of the beautiful. The sign of the beautiful is a technical term which means the idea of beauty, right? So it's not necessarily the object, but it is the fact that the mind is perceiving the object as beautiful or attractive. Now, this is one thing that makes greed stronger, but greed is not dependent on this. So you can be paying attention to something that is repulsive and still feel greed, right? So this is not a defining characteristic, but when greed gets stronger, there tends to be some sense of there's something beautiful or attractive there, and then the greed gets stronger and proliferates. But you can still be greedy or desiring something that's unattractive. Lust is a good example of this. Most of the things that we have lust for in terms of like sexuality are not pretty. They tend to be body parts, right? Which, if we really looked at them realistically, they're not inherently attractive. Yeah, they're usually skin and muscle and fat and blood and bone, and we nevertheless find ourselves working ourselves up into lust and attraction towards those things. Yeah, so we're having greed towards a repulsive thing, but often the sense of beauty eventually creeps in there, and that's what makes greed stronger. Yeah. But yeah, let's just throw out some ideas of greed and see if any of these land with you. When we're in a greedy mind state, we're interested in getting, having, holding, owning, possessing, protecting, and securing, right? These are all possible activities. We know that there's some greed present when we're liking, loving, adoring, doting on, beautifying, devoting ourselves to in a selfish or even a self-denying way. We know that greed is present when there's any attachment or clinging to something. We know that greed will be present whenever where there's flirtation, whenever there's attraction, lust, or desire. We know greed is present whenever we're overly focused on a sense of need or hunger or thirst. Yeah, and very often we'll experience greed in association with any sense of the mind when it's bargaining, or there's the lawyer mind, yeah, where it's like, oh, we have to get this thing, or this is the best thing, or oh, I can't wait to, I'll give up this in order to get that. It's greed that does that, yeah. The mind state of hate does not bargain. It doesn't reach compromises. Yeah, that's something that we do when oh yeah, I can make out good on this deal. Yeah. Nostalgia, sentimentality. These can be greedy states. Yeah. When the mind is inclining towards labeling or seeing something as new, fancy, expensive, pleasing, tasty, luxurious, these are all labels associated with greed. Any sense pleasure, be the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or even the sense pleasure we have towards thoughts, can land us in greed. There's also envy and jealousy. Yeah, any sense of coveting or fondness or preference or favoritism. Yeah. But these, often cultivated and developed, will bloom into fervor, fanaticism, obsession. Yeah, they can get quite intense, even to probably the pinnacle of greed would be narcissism. Yeah, and it's the belief that to get what we want is the most important thing. Yeah, and this is where somebody who is a narcissist is so certain that what they want is the most important thing that they will break any of the precepts and not feel shame towards doing it because they're getting what they want and they feel that that justifies it. Yeah. And this is one of these mental states where you assess that this is probably this person's tendency. This is the fool, yeah, the one that the Buddha says you probably should distance yourself from. If you notice that somebody, it's like, definitely, I think this is somebody who is so fixated on themselves and what they want that they would do anything to get it. And they would willingly do harm and then just say, well, I got what I wanted, so it was worth it. Then you probably don't try to fix them, just try to get safe from them. But yeah, I mean, it should be obvious, that any kind of greediness, hoarding, stinginess, penny pinching, these are all greedy states, right? That sense of like keeping, getting more of, never having enough of. Any sense of vanity or self-beautification or glorifying of something to make it prettier, this is often greedy. And then indulgence and excess. These are not always greed. These are sometimes happening through delusion, but they can definitely get started with greed. And then we even have states that come up where we have fear of harm of ourself or an object, fear of loss, fear of change, fear of ill speech or disrepute. Yeah? And the fear can still be a symptom of greed. Why? Because it's dealing specifically with something is threatened. Something that we like is threatened. Something that we love or that is essential to us is threatened. And so the greed is there for fueling that sense of like holding on and needing to protect. And the threat to that is what brings up the anxiety, the fear. Yeah. And so these are all some ideas. It's a vast network of all of these different ideas that play off of each other. Yeah. And one little sense desire, like, oh, I really like that particular kind of flowers. And wouldn't it be nice to have a vase of that kind of flowers on my table tomorrow? I think I'll go to the store and get some. It doesn't really seem like it's totally connected to something like vanity, where it's like, oh, I see how that I should put on a nice perfume and get so and so's attention. But if you think about it for a while, you see how they do have a kind of the same flavor. And if you indulge in one, like beautifying things and getting all of these nice things, these nice new luxurious things, you might find yourself doing the other activity. It was like, hey, come look at all of my nice, pretty expensive things. Yeah, aren't I good looking? Aren't I nice because of all of these nice things I have? Yeah, seemingly unrelated states are continuing the theme, growing the theme, enhancing the theme, conditioning each other. Yeah? This is how this mindfulness of the mind works. Yeah? And now, anybody, no matter your tendencies or proclivities, can experience greed. I've talked a lot, and I find it kind of useful to recognize that we have a basic personality trait. The greed type, the hatred type, the delusion type, and this is just a condition of our birth. Yeah, we kind of took birth based on a particular mind state, and that conditions the beginning of our life and our value set. And because our value set was conditioned in a particular way, we tend to have inclinations or predispositions towards certain kinds of thoughts. But even if we're, say, a delusion type, we can experience greed. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not all delusion. Or if we're a greed type, we could still experience hatred. Or if we're a hate type, we could be listening to all of this and say, this list is stupid. It doesn't apply to me. Just get on with it. Get to the good stuff. Yeah, something that's useful. But realistically, somebody who's predisposed to hatred can still experience greed, yeah? Especially towards the things that they like, the people that they like, the things that don't threaten them, the things that they've decided are trustworthy and reliable. Is a very important to a hate type, right? And so those are the things that they become attracted to, they look for, they covet. And when those things are threatened, they get mean, yeah? Because that's my thing, yeah? I don't have many things in this world that I actually like, but that is one of them, and I will defend it, yeah? So these are not, we get to experience all of these things until we completely uproot it, yeah? But we also don't completely uproot it until we uproot all of it. And so this is why this project is such a big project, to develop the mindfulness and purify the mind and pull out these roots, because there's so many different mind states. And if we keep any one of these that I just listed safe, and we say, I'm not going to mess with that, yeah, I kind of like that one, yeah, it'll be my little pet, I'll get rid of all the other ones. Well, even still, we can't get enlightened, because that one is kind of like a seed that, if it finds any fertile, damp soil, will grow and sprout and create new life of greed, yeah? And that's part of why none of us have gotten enlightened and got out of samsara yet. Because any one state, any one seed, can start the whole process again and lead to all of the other ones in time, even if we cleaned up everything else. So to get rid of it means to get rid of it completely. Yeah? But any work that we do to get rid of any of it will move us in the right direction, because it will open up the way for more states of non-greed, which will be a list in and of itself, but is harder to do a list of, right? Because it's not defined. Yeah? When you're not in those states that I listed, that would be non-greed, potentially. I mean, it could be hatred or delusion, but it might also be, non-greed. When you're content, you're satisfied, you're secure, you're happy, you're thrilled, you're delighted. Yeah, all of these things can be non-greed, and it's very hard to pin it down. But to round things out, why not take a look at hatred, right? So what do we got with hatred? Well, the first thing we would say is the sign of the repulsive, yeah? In the same way that greed gets stronger with the sign of the beautiful, hatred gets stronger with the sign of the repulsive. And this is the idea of something is bad, gross, disgusting, repulsive. I am averse to that. This is the sign of the repulsive, yeah? And it's not that, again, that hatred is dependent on it. We can hate something because it's so beautiful, right? But it gets stronger when we dwell on the repulsive qualities. When our mind gets, that idea becomes strong. Our mind doesn't always have a sign, it doesn't always have a nimitta going, a particular strong idea or association, but when it does, it tends to lead to stronger mind states that are more likely to proliferate. But then, what sort of states? So any state where we're trying to avoid or to reject, to denounce, rebuff, refuse, to spurn, to shun, to belittle or diminish any desire we might have to destroy or kill, any sense we might want to defy somebody or deny something, or even just to deplete something, to just whittle away at something, to make it less. Yeah. Whenever we have the urge to deface something or discolor it, or to even to disillusion somebody, to strip them of some idea that they have. Any underlying tone we have of annoyance or frustration or distaste or revulsion or despising something. Yeah. But also hatred can be the root of intolerance, prejudice, and discrimination. Yeah, all of these are based on a sense of aversion, or that quality or that race or that caste of people is a problem, is bad, is low, is to be reviled. All of that comes from the mind state of hatred. Yeah. But also, hatred is where we find states of pettiness. Yeah, where we don't care what happens as long as that person gets hurt. Yeah. But that can lead into stronger states. Yeah. Hatred in and of itself, hatred, but also anger, rage, and malice, the intense desire to cause harm. These fall within hatred. Yeah. But then we got vindictiveness, to have a grudge or a feud, any sense of spite. We just want them to hurt for what they have done to us, yeah? Or wrath and revenge, to seek comeuppance or retribution. These all dwell within hatred. But again, we could still have fear coming from the mind state of hatred. So any sense we have a wariness of a particular person or place or thing, caution, fear, even terror related to something or someone. Yeah, this can be rooted in the aversion, the hatred, the trying to keep them away, trying to keep that away, trying to keep the situation away. All of that is aversion. All of that is rooted in this mind state. Yeah? With greed, we have the hindrance of sense desire. With hatred, we have the hindrance of ill will. And this is when the hindrance takes root, we find that the mind is inclined to think of the bad qualities of something. And it gets in a rut where it wants to think of the bad qualities of something. And it wants harm to come to that thing. Yeah? All of this is hatred in a nutshell. Yeah? But I mean, if we were to put the two next to each other, you have the one where I like flowers and vacations and chocolates and I indulge a little in a bubble bath here and there, versus the I'm a racist and I hate people and I want to kill bugs. They don't seem to stack up, right? And it's true, the Buddha does say, in terms of which one is more blameworthy, society tends to accept greed a lot more easily than it does hatred. Hatred tends to be a lot more blameworthy. But this should not, it doesn't mean that hatred is less prevalent in the mind. It's just that we tend to hide it a bit more. We tend to, disguise our emotions a bit more whenever we're in a state of hatred. It tends to be the one that we're shy about. When we're angry at somebody, we did somebody, are you mad at me? No! Because it's wrong to be mad, right? So no, of course I'm not mad at you. I just don't want to talk to you and I don't want you talking to me, but I'm not mad. But in terms of mindfulness, all of this is data, right? We want to open up to the reality that we have all sorts of averse mind states that arise during the day. Yeah, we want to broaden this category and even let in the little things and be like, oh, look at the bug came by and I'm like, oh, another mosquito. And I'm like, what was that? I was upset. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. Where did that come from? Well, if we look, it's probably been there a while. We've probably been primed to be annoyed for minutes or hours even, right? It's been there simmering. It's like a pot on the stove set to the lowest setting. It's just been simmering, just waiting for somebody to come along and crank it up, right? And the moment it does, it just starts to boil and we're like, why am I so upset? Where did this come from? Well, it was there. It was cooking. It was ready. It just needed the cue to go. So we want to, when we're developing Chittanupassi, mindfulness of the mind, we don't change, yeah? Not yet. First we establish the mindfulness, then we can make changes. When we're super clear and stable, understanding where our mind is at, then we can start to play with the conditions. But at first, we just want to assess. And if any of the things I've said, it's like, okay, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing this. It's not a one-off. We don't have one-off thoughts. We don't have one-off feelings, yeah? The mind it has a root condition. Yeah, so it's going to be one of those 6 flavors: greed, hatred, delusion, non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. And so if we start to see a couple of signs that, a couple of those fell in the greedy category that he was talking about, we can just assess, yeah, it's possible that the mind is right now in a greedy state. But if it's low level, if it's easy to miss, it's entirely possible that it's not very strong, that there are not a lot of supportive conditions to keep us in that mind state. And again, like I said in the last time we talked about mindfulness of the mind, well, we won't necessarily know the moment that the mind shifts, right? We can't see the root condition of the mind. All we can see are the different thoughts. Yeah. So if we're paying attention to, okay, there was this pattern of these consistent pattern of aversive, greedy, annoyed, or hateful, annoyed, frustrated kind of thoughts, and we say, okay, I think I've been kind of nursing this state of aversion for a while, and then suddenly we notice they're absent, and you'd be like, well, what happened? We're like, well, I so-and-so called, and I thought, oh, it's so nice to talk to them. So I haven't heard from them in a while, and that got me it was great to have a conversation. Oh my God. I switched into friendly mode and I didn't even notice it, right? And this is kind of how the mind works. It's so easy to nurture the idea that we are a static thing. Like I am a hateful, hating, aversive person. Yeah, if we don't pay attention to the mind. But if we pay attention to the mind, we will see that, okay, from 8 a.m. to 9:15, I was a hateful, aversive, frustrated person. But then there was a half hour where I was looking at the birds and I was feeling kind of okay with the world. And then there was a 15-minute block where I read my emails. And then we would see that the mind is changing. It's moving through these different states. And gradually, what we will start to see, just because of mindfulness, is that they're not as sticky or persistent, or we don't struggle as much to get out of the bad ones and into the good ones. The more mindful we are, the more we can sort of catch the really troublesome conditions, and the more we get to find out which ones those are, and we focus our energy in the right place. All right, so these are some ideas on Chittanapasi. Hopefully this kind of expands the idea, so it's a bit more to work with. Yeah, and again, on Sunday we'll get to look at delusion in the same way, which is another big category of possible mind states. Yeah, and what does that look like in practice? Yeah. But until then, you have plenty to do. Looking for the greed and hatred, yeah? So I leave this for your reflection tonight.